First Contact Protocol. The alert came at 3:47 a.m. Earth Standard Time, jerking Dr. Sarah Chen awake from her fitful sleep in the xenobiology lab. The holographic display above her desk pulsed an urgent red, displaying the message she both dreaded and hoped for throughout her career. First Contact Protocol initiated. Sarah's hands trembled as she pulled up the preliminary data. The vessel had appeared at the edge of Mars' orbit, its design unlike anything humans had encountered in their limited space exploration. It wasn't the massive warships that filled humanity's science fiction nightmares, but rather a sleek, almost organic-looking craft that seemed to shimmer against the backdrop of stars. Dr. Chen, the AI assistant's voice was calm, measured. Your presence is requested in the emergency response chamber. Transport arriving in 5 minutes. She quickly gathered her tablet and the specialized medical kit she prepared years ago for exactly this scenario. The kit contained everything from basic analysis tools to sophisticated genetic sequencers, all designed to work with potentially alien biology. As she rushed to the transport pad, her mind raced through the countless scenarios she practiced. The emergency response chamber was already buzzing with activity when she arrived. Military personnel moved with practiced precision, while diplomatic staff huddled around displays showing the approaching vessel. At the center of it all stood Admiral James Harrison, his weathered face illuminated by the holographic projections. "Dr. Chen," he nodded as she approached. "Glad you're here. Our visitors are requesting immediate medical consultation. They're calling themselves the Varens." Sarah's scientific curiosity piqued. Medical consultation. They've made specific requests already. More than that, Harrison's expression was grave. They're requesting permission to land, claiming they're facing a biological crisis that only human expertise can solve. Their ambassador, Kylax, has been quite insistent. Before Sarah could respond, the chamber's main display flickered to life, revealing a figure that made her breath catch. The Varen ambassador stood nearly 7 feet tall, with iridescent skin that seemed to shift colors with each movement. Their eyes were large, multifaceted like those of an insect, but held an intelligence that was unmistakably sentient. "Greetings, representatives of Earth." Kylax's voice was surprisingly melodious, translated through their advanced systems. "We come seeking your help in a matter of grave importance to our species." Sarah stepped forward, her scientific training taking over. "I'm Dr. Sarah Chen, head of xenobiology at the Global Science Initiative. Can you tell us more about the nature of your crisis?" The ambassador's skin rippled, showing what Sarah would later learn was a sign of deep concern. "Our species is facing an epidemic unlike anything in our recorded history. Our most advanced medical technology has failed to halt its progress. We have reason to believe that human biology holds the key to our survival." "What led you to that conclusion?" Sarah asked, her mind already racing through possibilities. "We have been observing your species, Dr. Chen. Your remarkable adaptive immune system, your biological resilience, they are unique among all the species we have encountered. We believe these traits might help us understand our own crisis." Admiral Harrison stepped forward. "Ambassador, you understand we'll need to establish proper protocols before any medical cooperation can begin. The risks of cross-species contamination." "With respect, Admiral," Kylax interrupted, their skin now pulsing with urgent patterns. "We have already taken every precaution. Our ship maintains perfect quarantine, and we have detailed data ready to share. But time is not our ally. Already, colonies across our system are reporting new cases." Sarah studied the Varen's body language, noting the subtle vibrations in their crystalline-like exoskeleton. Everything about their biology was fascinating, but something about their request nagged at her scientific instincts. Why would an advanced species, capable of interstellar travel, need help from humans who had barely established a permanent presence on Mars? "Ambassador," she said carefully, "I'd like to begin with a preliminary data exchange. If you could share your medical records and genetic information, We can start analyzing compatibility factors immediately. The ambassador's relief was visible in the way their color shifted to a softer hue. Of course, Dr. Chen. We have prepared extensive documentation. But there is something else. They paused, their massive eyes focusing intently on Sarah. We believe direct observation of human biological responses may be crucial. Would you be willing to serve as our primary research subject? The chamber fell silent. Sarah felt every eye turn to her, human and alien alike. This was far beyond standard first contact protocol. But then again, nothing about this situation was standard. The fate of an entire species might hang in the balance, and with it, humanity's first real chance at peaceful contact with an advanced civilization. Before I agree to anything, Sarah said, maintaining her professional composure, I need to understand exactly what you're asking for and why you chose Earth specifically. There must be other spacefaring races with advanced medical knowledge. Kylax's skin rippled with what might have been appreciation. You are wise to question, Dr. Chen. The truth is, we have visited 17 other civilizations before coming here. None possessed the unique biological characteristics we observed in humans. Your species' ability to adapt to extreme conditions, to survive where others would perish, it is unprecedented in our experience. Admiral Harrison cleared his throat. Ambassador, you understand this information raises several security concerns. If you've been observing us, only through passive means, Admiral Kylax assured him. We have strict protocols about interference with developing civilizations, but the severity of our crisis forced us to break our normal procedures. Sarah's mind was already racing with the implications. If the Varens had studied multiple alien species, the scientific knowledge they possessed would be invaluable. But first, they had to establish trust. I propose a compromise, she said, addressing both Harrison and Kylax. We can begin with a controlled exchange of medical data and preliminary testing in a quarantine environment. No invasive procedures without full disclosure and approval from both sides. The ambassador's skin shifted to a deep, resonant blue. This is acceptable. But Dr. Chen, I must emphasize the urgency of our situation. The epidemic spreads exponentially, and our most recent models suggest we have less than 3 Earth months before it reaches a critical threshold. Sarah nodded, her decision made. Then we should begin immediately. Admiral, with your permission, I'd like to establish a secure medical facility for this cooperation. We'll need a full team, geneticists, immunologists, epidemiologists. Granted, Harrison said after a moment's consideration, but everything goes through proper channels, and we maintain full containment protocols. As the chamber erupted into activity, with staff rushing to implement the necessary arrangements, Sarah found herself studying the alien ambassador more closely. Despite their obvious biological differences, she could read the worry in their posture, the desperation in their careful movements. Whatever was affecting their species, it had them truly frightened. She approached the display once more. Ambassador Kylax, I give you my word that we'll do everything in our power to help. But I need you to understand that trust must go both ways. Any deception could have catastrophic consequences for both our species. The Varen's skin rippled with complex patterns that the translation system interpreted as both acknowledgement and respect. Of course, Dr. Chen, we are placing our lives in your hands. We offer complete transparency in return. As Sarah began coordinating with her team to prepare for the Varen ship's arrival, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was stepping into something far more complex than a simple medical crisis. The way the ambassador had spoken about human biology, the fact that they had studied multiple alien species, there were pieces to this puzzle she couldn't yet see. But for now, she had work to do. Humanity's first official contact with an alien species would also be its first chance to prove itself on an interstellar stage. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Sarah was determined to face them with the same curiosity and determination that had driven human scientific achievement throughout history. The biological puzzle. The Varan ship's quarantine dock gleamed under the harsh lights of the newly established research facility. Sarah stood at her workstation, surrounded by holographic displays showing cascading strings of alien genetic code. After 3 days of continuous work, she was beginning to see patterns in the seemingly chaotic data. Their genetic structure is fascinating, she murmured to Dr. Marcus Wong, her colleague in xenogenetics. Look at these protein formations. They're almost crystalline in nature. Marcus nodded, his eyes fixed on another display showing microscopic images of Varan tissue samples. The way their cells interact with light is unlike anything we've seen. It's as if their entire biology is built around photonic energy processing. The door slid open with a soft hiss, and Ambassador Killax entered, their exoskeleton shifting through shades of deep purple. 2 other Varans accompanied them, their movements careful in the Earth standard gravity. Dr. Chen. Killax's translated voice carried a note of urgency. We've received new data from our home system. 3 more colonies have reported outbreaks. Sarah straightened, trying to hide her fatigue. Show me. The ambassador interfaced with the facility's systems, and new data streams appeared in the air. Sarah's heart sank as she processed the information. The epidemic was spreading faster than their initial models had predicted. The pattern is changing, she realized, highlighting specific sequences in the data. The virus, or whatever this is, it's not just spreading, it's evolving. But in a way that seems deliberate. Marcus finished her thought, his expression grim. Killax's skin rippled with what Sarah had learned to recognize as distress. What are you suggesting? Sarah chose her words carefully. The changes we're seeing don't follow normal patterns of viral mutation. They're too precise, too targeted. It's as if the pathogen knows exactly how to bypass each new defense your people develop. A heavy silence fell over the laboratory. The implications were disturbing. Either they were dealing with an unprecedented form of biological evolution, or something far more sinister. There's something else, Sarah continued, pulling up her latest analysis. We've been comparing the pathogen's behavior to known human viruses, and we found something strange. It shows no interest in human tissue samples. It's completely inert when exposed to human cells. Killax moved closer to the display, their multifaceted eyes reflecting the scrolling data. This confirms our theories about human immunity. But we still don't understand why. Sarah had been pondering this question since their first meetings. I have a hypothesis, but I'll need to run more tests. Ambassador, you mentioned that humans are unique among the species you've encountered. What exactly makes us different? The ambassador's skin shifted to a deep, thoughtful blue. Your adaptability is unprecedented. Most species we've encountered evolved to fit specific environmental niches. Humans, you adapt to your environment instead of requiring the environment to adapt to you. And this adaptability is reflected in our immune system. Sarah mused. We've evolved to fight off an incredibly diverse range of pathogens. Our immune responses are sometimes excessive, but they're extraordinarily effective. Marcus pulled up another display, this one showing comparative analyses of human and Varan immune responses. Look at this. When exposed to new pathogens, human immune cells show an almost aggressive response. It's like they're programmed to attack first and ask questions later. Which might explain why the pathogen affecting your people doesn't interact with human tissue, Sarah said, excitement building as the pieces began to fit together. It's not that we're immune. It's that our biology is so fundamentally different that the pathogen doesn't recognize us as viable hosts. Killax's skin rippled with intense patterns. Can this help us develop a treatment? Maybe, Sarah said, already formulating new research directions. But we need to understand more about how your biology differs from ours at a fundamental level. Ambassador, I need to ask you something personal. The Varan's attention focused entirely on her. Proceed. You've been hesitant to share information about your species' evolutionary history. I understand the need for discretion, but if we're going to solve this, we need the complete picture. What aren't you telling us about your people's biology? The patterns in Kylax's skin became more complex, shifting through colors Sarah had never seen them display before. The other two Varens moved restlessly, their own exoskeletons displaying signs of agitation. What you ask touches on sensitive matters, Kylax finally said. But you are right. You need to know. They paused, seeming to gather their thoughts. Our species did not evolve naturally, Dr. Chen. We were engineered. The revelation hung in the air like a physical presence. Sarah heard Marcus inhale sharply beside her. Engineered. Sarah kept her voice steady, professional. By whom? We do not know, Kylax admitted. The truth of our origins was lost ages ago. What we do know is that our biology was designed with purpose, perfect efficiency, perfect harmony with our environment. Until now, we had never encountered a pathogen we couldn't adapt to. Sarah's mind raced with the implications. An engineered species would explain the Varens' unique biological characteristics, their crystalline cellular structure, their ability to process light energy, their seemingly perfect adaptation to their environment. But it also meant, your immune systems, she said slowly. They're designed to be perfectly efficient, aren't they? No redundancies, no excessive responses, no unnecessary adaptations. Kylax's skin pulsed with confirmation. Yes, our bodies maintain perfect homeostasis through precisely calibrated responses. That's your weakness, Sarah realized. Perfect efficiency means no room for error, no capacity for the kind of brutal, shotgun approach that human immune systems take when faced with something truly novel. We have no way to adapt, Kylax finished. Our perfection has become our vulnerability. Marcus was already pulling up new data streams. This changes everything. We need to completely rethink our approach. Instead of trying to enhance the Varen immune response, maybe we need to introduce controlled imperfection, create room for adaptation. Sarah nodded, her exhaustion forgotten in the rush of new possibilities. Ambassador, I need you to authorize full access to your species' genetic records. If we're going to help your people, we need to understand exactly how you were engineered. And more importantly, how we might carefully modify those engineered systems. The ambassador's skin displayed complex patterns that the translation system struggled to interpret. Finally, they spoke. What you suggest is unprecedented. Modifying our core biology, it would change everything we are. Sometimes survival requires change, Sarah said gently. Humanity's greatest strength isn't our intelligence or our technology. It's our ability to adapt, to embrace imperfection, to evolve. Maybe that's what your people need now. As Kylax considered her words, Sarah turned back to her displays, mind already working through the complexities of what they were about to attempt. They weren't just fighting an epidemic anymore. They were about to rewrite the biology of an entire species. The implications were staggering, and the risks even more so. One mistake could doom the Varens instead of saving them. But as she looked at the desperate hope in Kylax's multifaceted eyes, Sarah knew they had to try. Marcus, she said, contact the genetics team. We need to start modeling possible modification scenarios immediately. And Ambassador, she turned back to Kylax, I need you to prepare your people for what's coming. This won't be an easy process. The Varen's skin rippled with determination. We are ready, Dr. Chen. We trust in human ingenuity, and in you. As the laboratory burst into renewed activity, Sarah couldn't help but appreciate the irony. The Varens had come to Earth seeking help from what they saw as a primitive species, only to discover that humanity's very primitiveness, our messy, inefficient, adaptable biology, might be exactly what they needed to survive. Invisible patterns. Red warning lights flashed across the laboratory's ceiling as Sarah stared at the latest test results in disbelief. The modified human antibodies they'd engineered had just triggered a catastrophic reaction in the Varen tissue samples. Containment protocols holding steady, Marcus reported from his station, his voice tense. But Sarah, look at these readings. The reaction rate is exponential. Through the quarantine field, they watched as the crystalline structure of the Varen cells began to fragment and collapse. Sarah's hands flew across her console, initiating emergency preservation protocols while her mind raced to understand what had gone wrong. "Stop all trials," she ordered, her voice sharp with frustration. "Full shutdown. Now." As the emergency systems whirred to life, neutralizing the failed experiment, Ambassador Kylax entered the laboratory. Their exoskeleton had taken on a pale, almost translucent quality that Sarah had never seen before. "Dr. Chen," the ambassador's translated voice was unnaturally steady. "We've lost contact with the Meridian colony. 12,000 of my people, gone silent." Sarah's heart sank. Another failure, another loss, while they struggled to find a solution. "Ambassador, show me what happened here," Kylax interrupted, moving to examine the quarantine samples. Sarah pulled up the test data, explaining as diplomatically as possible. "We attempted to introduce modified human immune responses into Varen tissue. The goal was to trigger controlled adaptation, but instead," she gestured at the destroyed samples. "The reaction was violent," Marcus added, joining them at the display, "as if the human elements were treating the Varen tissue as hostile." Kylax's skin rippled with complex patterns that the translation system interpreted as deep concern. "This is the 9th failed attempt. Time grows short, Dr. Chen." "I know." Sarah ran her hands through her disheveled hair, fighting exhaustion. "But there's something we're missing. These reactions, they're not random. There's a pattern here we're not seeing." She began pulling up data from all their failed trials, spreading the information across multiple holographic displays. 2 weeks of work, 9 catastrophic failures, and countless smaller setbacks. But as she studied the combined data, something caught her eye. "Marcus," she called sharply, "look at the degradation patterns in trials 3, 7, and 9. Do you see it?" He leaned in, eyes narrowing. "The crystalline structures. They're not just breaking down. They're reorganizing." "Exactly. And look at the energy signatures during the process." Sarah highlighted specific data streams. "They're almost identical to the patterns we see in natural Varen cellular reproduction." Kylax moved closer, their multifaceted eyes reflecting the scrolling data. "What are you suggesting?" "I think we've been approaching this all wrong," Sarah said, excitement building as the pieces began to fall into place. "We've been trying to force human adaptability into Varen biology, but what if we instead trigger your own natural reproductive processes? Use them to introduce controlled mutations?" "Impossible," one of Kylax's scientific advisors spoke up from the doorway. Sarah hadn't even noticed them enter. "Our reproductive processes are precisely engineered. They do not allow for mutation." "But they did once," Sarah countered. "Your species may have been engineered, but you evolved from something. Those base patterns must still exist in your genetic code, dormant but present." She quickly pulled up the Varen genetic database, searching for specific sequences. "Look here, these segments you've labeled as non-functional. They're not junk code. They're evolutionary artifacts, remnants of your species' pre-engineered state." The laboratory fell silent as the implications sank in. What Sarah was suggesting wasn't just a treatment. It was a fundamental change to the Varen species, awakening genetic memories that had lain dormant for countless generations. "The risk would be enormous," Marcus said quietly. "We'd be tampering with the fundamental nature of their species. We're already dying." Kylax's skin pulsed with intense colors. "If there is even a chance, this could save our people." Sarah nodded, already formulating a plan. "We'll need to design a retrovirus, something that can activate these dormant sequences without triggering your engineered immune responses. It's delicate work, but..." She was interrupted by a sudden commotion at the laboratory entrance. Admiral Harrison burst in, followed by a team of security personnel. "Dr. Chen," his face was grave, "we've just received a transmission. You need to see this." The main display came to life, showing a message that made Sarah's blood run cold. It was from another alien species, one they hadn't encountered before. The translation was rough, but the meaning was clear. To the humans of Earth, the species known as the Varens are not what they claim. Their presence on your world represents a grave threat. The biological crisis they face is not natural. It is containment. They are a weapon, and you are being used. The laboratory erupted into chaos. Security personnel moved to contain the Varen representatives, while Admiral Harrison began issuing rapid orders. But Sarah's attention was fixed on Ambassador Kylax, watching as their skin shifted through patterns she had never seen before. "Ambassador," she said quietly, even as guards moved to separate them. "Is it true?" Kylax's response came in their natural voice, untranslated, a haunting melody of crystalline tones that seemed to carry centuries of history and pain. The translation system took a moment to process. "The truth, Dr. Chen, is far more complex than either side would have you believe. And now you must decide. Will you help us evolve, or will you let us be destroyed?" Sarah looked at the destroyed tissue samples, at the data showing patterns of death and renewal, at the faces of her colleagues caught between fear and scientific curiosity. In that moment, she realized that humanity's first major decision on the galactic stage would not be about first contact or diplomatic relations. It would be about evolution itself. Breaking point. This facility is now under military quarantine. Admiral Harrison's voice echoed through the laboratory's communication system. "All research is suspended pending full investigation." Sarah stood at her workstation, refusing to move as security personnel escorted the Varen delegates to a containment area. Her eyes remained fixed on her displays, where critical data continued to stream in from active experiments. "Sir," she addressed Harrison directly, "we can't stop now. The cellular degradation is accelerating in all remaining colonies. If we halt our research, if we continue," Harrison cut her off, "we might be helping to unleash something far worse than an epidemic." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Did you see the full transmission? The Arxons claim the Varens were designed as a biological terraforming system. They don't just adapt to environments. They transform them." Sarah's mind raced through the implications. The Varens' crystalline biology, their perfect adaptation, their sophisticated photonic energy processing, it all pointed to an engineered system of unprecedented complexity. Even if that's true, she argued, they're still sentient beings facing extinction. We can't just. A sudden alarm cut through their conversation. One of the quarantine chambers was showing critical readings. "Dr. Chen," Marcus called from his station, "the latest tissue samples. They're doing something new." Sarah rushed to his station. Harrison closed behind. The Varen tissue samples they'd been experimenting on were exhibiting unprecedented behavior. The crystalline structures weren't just reorganizing. They were evolving in real time. "This is impossible," Marcus whispered, adjusting sensors to better track the changes. "The rate of mutation. It's like nothing we've ever seen." Sarah's fingers flew across the console, analyzing the data. "It's not just mutation. Look at the energy signatures. They're resonating, communicating somehow." "Stop the experiment," Harrison ordered. "Shut it down now." "Wait." Sarah held up her hand, her scientific curiosity overriding protocol. "These patterns, they match the dormant sequences we found earlier. The ones I thought were evolutionary artifacts. But they're not dormant anymore." The laboratory's main door slid open, and Ambassador Kylax entered, flanked by guards. Their exoskeleton was pulsing with patterns so complex the translation system couldn't interpret them. "You're right, Dr. Chen," they said, their translated voice carrying new harmonics. "What you're seeing is our true nature asserting itself. The nature our creators try to suppress." "Explain," Harrison demanded. "What exactly are you?" Kylax moved to the quarantine chamber, their multifaceted eyes reflecting the shifting patterns of the tissue samples. We were created to be perfect adapters, yes, but not to terraform, to preserve, to maintain balance in ecosystems across the galaxy. We were to be guardians, not conquerors. But something went wrong. Sarah guessed, studying the increasingly complex mutations occurring in the samples. Our creators feared our potential, Kylax continued. They engineered restrictions into our biology, locked away our ability to truly evolve. The epidemic you've been fighting, it's not a disease. It's our own suppressed nature fighting to break free. Marcus pulled up new data streams. The resonance patterns, they're similar to quantum entanglement. Your cells aren't just communicating. They're sharing evolutionary information across vast distances. A distributed consciousness, Sarah breathed, understanding dawning. Your entire species is connected at a quantum level. That's why the changes spread so quickly across your colonies. Harrison stepped forward. And what happens if this suppressed nature fully awakens? What are you really capable of? Kylax's skin rippled with what might have been sadness. We don't know. That knowledge was taken from us. But we believe we were meant to be more than what we are. To grow, to change, to help life flourish in all its forms, or to reshape entire worlds according to your will, Harrison countered. Sarah moved to her main console, pulling up all their research data. There might be a way to control the process, if we can understand the quantum mechanisms at work. She was interrupted by new alarms. The tissue samples were changing more rapidly now, their crystalline structures expanding and shifting in ways that defied their understanding of physics. Energy readings are off the scale, Marcus reported, his voice tense. The quantum resonance is strengthening. If this continues, it's already too late, Kylax said softly. The awakening has begun. Across all our colonies, our people are changing, evolving. We can feel it. The ambassador's exoskeleton began to pulse with light, patterns flowing like liquid crystal. Around them, every piece of equipment containing Varan biological material started to resonate in response. The question now, Kylax turned to Sarah, is not whether we will change, but how. Your understanding of adaptation, of controlled chaos and beneficial mutation, it could help us guide this transformation. Help us become what we were truly meant to be. Sarah looked at Harrison, seeing the conflict in his eyes. They were witnessing the rebirth of an entire species, one that could either become humanity's greatest ally or its greatest threat. The Arxans were partly right, she said finally. The Varans are incredible biological engineers, but they're not weapons, they're catalysts. And right now, they need our help to ensure their evolution benefits all life, not just their own. Harrison was quiet for a long moment, watching as the tissue samples continued their mesmerizing transformation. Finally, he spoke. You have 48 hours, Dr. Chen. Find a way to help them control this process, or I'll have no choice but to implement final containment protocols. As the Admiral left the laboratory, Sarah turned back to her work with renewed determination. Humanity's greatest strengths had always been its ability to adapt, to learn, to help others grow. Now those same qualities might determine the future of not just one species, but the very nature of life in the galaxy. Marcus, she called, start mapping those quantum resonance patterns. Ambassador, she turned to Kylax, I need you to tell me everything you know about your original purpose. No more secrets. The Varan's skin shifted to a deep, resonant blue. Where shall we begin? Evolution's bridge. The laboratory hummed with energy as Sarah watched the final simulation run its course. 47 hours had passed since Harrison's ultimatum, and they were down to their last chance. Behind her, Marcus coordinated with teams around the world, while Ambassador Kylax stood perfectly still, their crystalline form resonating with the same frequencies they detected in the evolving tissue samples. Final sequence initiating, Marcus announced. Quantum resonance patterns are stable. Sarah studied the holographic display showing their proposed solution, a carefully engineered viral vector designed to help guide the Varan's awakening transformation. It wasn't meant to stop their evolution, but rather to help them control it, to channel their emerging abilities in constructive ways. The key was never in our immune system, she said, mostly to herself. It was in our neural plasticity, our brain's ability to adapt and rewire itself while maintaining core functions. Kylax's skin rippled with understanding. You're not trying to change our biology. You're teaching us how to change ourselves. Exactly. Sarah pulled up the latest data from the Varan colonies. The transformation was spreading rapidly now, with entire populations beginning to exhibit new abilities and forms. Your species was designed to be perfect, but perfection is static. What you need is the ability to grow, to learn, to make mistakes, and adapt from them. The ambassador moved closer to the display, their multifaceted eyes reflecting the scrolling data. And you believe this vector will help us achieve that. It's based on human neuroplasticity mechanisms, modified to work with your crystalline biology, Marcus explained. Instead of forcing changes or suppressing them, it creates guidelines, like installing basic operating parameters in a quantum computer. A new alarm sounded. Another Varan colony had begun its transformation. The quantum resonance was growing stronger by the hour, threatening to spiral out of control. We're out of time, Sarah said, checking the simulation one final time. The vector is ready, but Ambassador, you need to understand the risks. This isn't just genetic engineering. We're attempting to influence the evolution of a quantum-linked consciousness. If we're wrong, if we do nothing, we face extinction either way, Kylax interrupted. Either from our own transformation, or from those who fear what we might become. Their skin pulsed with complex patterns of determination and hope. We trust you, Dr. Chen. Humanity has shown us that imperfection, adaptation, and growth are not weaknesses. They are the foundations of true strength. The laboratory door slid open, and Admiral Harrison entered with his security team. Time's up, Doctor. What's your status? Sarah took a deep breath. The vector is ready. But sir, you need to know, this goes beyond just helping the Varans. What we've discovered here about quantum biology and guided evolution, it changes everything we thought we knew about life itself. Harrison studied the displays, his expression unreadable. Will it work? Theoretically, yes. The vector should help them maintain conscious control over their transformation while allowing for natural evolution. But practically, she gestured at the readings showing the growing quantum resonance. We're in uncharted territory. This could be the beginning of something entirely new. The Admiral was quiet for a long moment, weighing the implications. Finally, he nodded. Do it, but be ready for anything. Sarah turned to Kylax. Are your people ready? The ambassador's skin shifted to a deep, resonant blue that seemed to pulse with its own light. We are. The vector has already been distributed to all our medical facilities. We await only your signal. Sarah's fingers hovered over the activation sequence. In this moment, she felt the weight of two species' futures resting on their work. Everything they'd learned about the Varans, about evolution, about the very nature of life, had led to this point. Marcus, she called, begin monitoring all quantum frequency bands. Ambassador, please link with your people. We need to track the transformation's progression in real time. As her colleagues moved into position, Sarah initiated the sequence. Across the galaxy, Varan medical facilities began introducing the vector to their transforming populations. The effect was almost immediate. The quantum resonance patterns shifted, becoming more organized, more coherent. On their displays, they watched as the chaotic energy signatures began to stabilize into complex but controlled patterns. It's working, Marcus breathed, watching the data stream in. The vector is establishing the neural frameworks. They're learning to control the transformation. Kylax's form began to shimmer with new colors, their crystalline structure subtly shifting while maintaining its integrity. We can feel it, they said, their voice carrying new harmonics that made the translation system buzz. The change, it's different now. Controlled. We understand. The ambassador's voice trailed off as their form continued to evolve, becoming something both familiar and entirely new. The crystalline patterns of their exoskeleton flowed like liquid light, but instead of the chaos they'd feared, the changes followed precise, beautiful patterns. Remarkable, Harrison whispered, all military protocol forgotten in the face of what they were witnessing. What exactly are we seeing, Doctor? Sarah could hardly tear her eyes away from the readings. The birth of a new kind of life. The Varens aren't just changing their forms, they're developing a true quantum consciousness, one that can adapt and evolve while maintaining its essential nature. Over the next few hours, reports came in from Varen colonies across the galaxy. The transformation was proceeding smoothly, guided by the neural frameworks provided by the Vector. What had begun as a crisis was becoming a revolution in the very nature of life itself. Dr. Chen. Kylek spoke, their form now stabilized into something that somehow combined crystalline precision with organic fluidity. Your species has given us more than survival. You've shown us a new way to exist, one that embraces change while preserving identity. Sarah smiled, exhausted but fulfilled. That's what humanity does best, isn't it? We adapt, we learn, we help others do the same. Speaking of which, she pulled up new research data. The principles we've discovered here about quantum biology and guided evolution. They could revolutionize medicine, environmental restoration, even space exploration. Harrison nodded thoughtfully. I suppose this means humanity's role in the galaxy just got a lot more interesting. Indeed. Kylax agreed, their skin displaying patterns of what the translation system now identified as joy. You've proven that sometimes the most primitive path, embracing chaos, imperfection, and adaptation, is actually the most advanced. Our species will never forget this lesson. As Sarah looked around the laboratory at her human colleagues working alongside their newly evolved Varen counterparts, she realized they'd accomplished something far greater than saving a species. They'd built a bridge between two fundamentally different approaches to life itself, proving that evolution, whether natural or engineered, was at its best when it brought different forms of life together in harmony. The future would bring new challenges, new discoveries, and new forms of life they couldn't yet imagine. But humanity had proven itself ready for that future, not despite its imperfections, but because of them. In the end, it wasn't perfect engineering or advanced technology that had saved the day. It was humanity's greatest gift, the ability to embrace change, learn from mistakes, and help others do the same.